So, have you watched The Mandalorian, Jason?
No. I actually don't have a Disney Plus subscription.
Oh, okay. That definitely makes it more difficult.
I
I'm
have
not going
heard
to
it's really
advocate.
good though.
Yeah, I'm not going to advocate for any illegal means of watching it. I do have Disney Plus, but I have not had the time to start watching The Mandalorian yet. But I've also heard good things about it, so I'm very curious to see how it turns out.
Yeah.
Um, so, speaking of Disney Plus, there's kind of some Disney and Apple related things we can talk about with regard to like competition between them and some other Apple stuff that's happened since we last recorded. So, let's jump right in, I guess. As always, I'm Uluru, and I'm joined by Jason, and this is episode 7,
Seven?
question mark, of
Yep.
the flock. So, the main thing that happened since we last spoke was the announcement of the new 16-inch MacBook Pro, which kind of caught everybody by surprise, at least the people who didn't get briefed about it in meetings.
Yeah.
So, what do you think are the highlights of the update?
Bigger screen, and not it's not being any more expensive than it used to be.
That's definitely a good thing. I think the main thing is the keyboard, honestly. It's
Oh yeah.
no longer terrible.
Yeah.
I have never used a butterfly keyboard outside of the Apple Store, so I don't know if I would have gotten accustomed to it, but I'm very much glad that it's back to a more clicky and higher travel design because I
Yeah.
like my MacBook Air keyboard from the previous generation, which is really nice. I'll just type something on it to make loud clicking noises. It's very nice. It feels very satisfying to type on. So that's what I think is the main thing. It really shows that Apple's been listening to the complaints from users and really taking the needs of pros seriously. So that's pretty
Yeah.
good. I'm curious what that could mean for the iPad in the future, if Apple really is listening to feedback. Like, I wonder if that's why iPad OS is now so much more powerful. And
Yeah.
I wonder what else that could lead to down the line.
Yeah.
So to get like really specific, the new MacBook Pro does have a 16-inch screen with slightly narrower bezels, but still square edge corners, not rounded.
Yeah.
And it has an escape key, which I think is
Oh
really
yeah.
good, next
Yeah.
to the touch bar. And still the Touch ID / power button off to the side. Inverted
Yep.
C arrows, which I think are really nice. They do obviously aesthetically look not quite as good because of the slightly awkward little gap between the left and right keys and the keys above. But I think overall it's a really good update to the keyboard, even if it's not necessarily aesthetically pleasing because it requires a thicker laptop and all that. It still is good because of the focus on function, even at the expense of form in some cases. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty glad about that. And also still a nice trackpad, like you said, still a reasonable-ish price point, I guess.
Yeah.
It's further justified by the fact that they have stuff under it in the line.
Yeah.
What would you guess is the maxed out price for a fully decked out MacBook Pro, 16-inch?
I think I've seen this online. It's like $6,006.
$6,099, but you were very close. You get credit for that question. Yeah. So I'm looking at a picture of it. The bezels are the side bezels are very slim.
Oh yeah.
I hope that someday we'll see a MacBook with rounded corners on the screen, though.
Yeah.
And I mean, next year is a potential candidate for the launch of ARM MacBooks. So that's another thing to get kind of excited about.
Yeah.
Still got 4 USB-C ports, the same processor as the previous generation.
Yep.
So apparently there's you can increase the amount of RAM up to 64 gigs, and I think you can get higher VRAM too, but it's still the same processor set as the last one. And so what do you think about USB-C on MacBooks? Do you think they need to go back to like an SD card slot or anything else? Or do you think, are you all in with them on USB-C?
I don't really see any issues with USB-C. As long as you have a dongle with you, you should be fine.
Okay, so you're one of the dongle people.
Yeah, even though I don't own a MacBook with USB-C.
Oh, right, yeah. But ideologically, that does make sense. Like,
yeah.
I think eventually we will get to the point where USB-C does kind of catch up with what Apple's done. I think they've kind of taken a step ahead with the MacBook line, but also they're still a step behind with the iPhone. And I don't think that the iPhone's ever going to get USB-C. I think it's going to go from Lightning to portless. So nothing in between. It would just be kind of another extra painful transition for people to go from Lightning to USB-C and then from USB-C to portless. Yeah. So also, apparently the speakers on the new MacBook Pro are really good. I want to hear them in person because my laptop speakers are not great. I mean, I don't really have any means of comparing them against something else because they're the only ones I ever really have used, and even at that I have headphones in most of the time, so I'm curious to see how it sounds. Apparently people have said that it could be used as like a legit portable speaker in some settings. So
that's impressive.
Yes.
Especially for a laptop.
Right, and it's still pretty thin, even though it's gotten a little bit thicker. They've always been pretty thin.
Yeah.
So, yeah, overall the MacBook Pro looks really nice. It's kind of a step back toward the real needs of pros as they've communicated with Apple what they need, and it still preserves things that make the MacBook kind of, in Apple's eyes, a step ahead of the competition, like the touch bar and USB-C and overall thinness. But I think it's a really good compromise between form and function, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm also very curious to see like what Apple's vision is for the Mac line in the future. Like, are they wanting to stick with this clamshell design where it's just keys and then the touch bar and then the screen, or are they going for like an all-screen keyboard? Would you use a MacBook that had a secondary display as its keyboard?
Probably not. I don't know if I could get used to that, especially with typing, getting up to speed.
Yeah, I think that the majority of people could get used to it, even if it's not like a one-size-fits-all thing. I think maybe whatever Apple's main consumer laptop in 6 years, that could have a touchscreen keyboard, in my opinion. And I think that when they figure out how to get better tactile feedback, that'll kind of seal the deal and make it even easier for people to make the transition, because it'll also offer other things beyond just the keyboard. Like the iPhone's screen isn't just its keyboard, it's also a bunch of other things. So any secondary display could also serve as a productivity benefit. So if I could see what one Apple product line looks like in 5 years, it might be the MacBook, because I'm just curious where it's going to go. With the iPhone, you can kind of predict it's going more toward even slimmer bezels, and it's kind of already progressed toward its original vision. But with the MacBook, it seems like that vision is changing more often. And it's gone from like, okay, we're pursuing nothing but thinness, even at the expense of the user experience, to maybe there's something else that they're going for. So I'm very curious to see where that ends up going. And luckily, I don't have to just pick one to see what it looks like in the future. I don't have to make the decision between figuring out what the Macs look like in 5 years and what the iPhones look like in 5 years. We'll get to see all of it eventually. So the future looks interesting. So other than the MacBook, AirPods Pro have been shipping. We talked about that last episode, so we don't need to spend too much time on it, but impressions seem generally positive. Noise cancellation isn't the best you can get, but it's good for what they are physically. Obviously, they're kind of running up against the limits of what physics allows them to do.
Yeah.
But They're impressive for what they are. And the other thing that's happened is Disney Plus is now on the market, kind of quote unquote competing against Apple TV Plus now, in that it's in the same product category. Do you think that they're actually really competing?
I don't think they really are. I don't think Apple TV Plus is as big as it seems. I don't think really any of the new services are as big as they seem. I think Disney Plus is, like, with its huge library of movies and TV shows and other things, it's probably what most people are going to go for, especially comparing it to Apple TV Plus.
Right. I think that we're still at the point where Apple TV Plus is really only going to be used by people who get it for free. And I think Apple's kind of okay with that because, like, if I look at my App Store homepage, I'm seeing Disney Plus as, like, the top story on there. And Disney Plus is also ranked #1 in entertainment on the App Store. So obviously people are really flocking to this app just because of how essential it is already, because of the content it offers. So I think Apple knows that it can't really compete with Disney Plus on the level that Disney Plus is playing at right now.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of just taking its time to establish the stories it wants to tell for free on new devices when people get like their free year of Apple TV Plus.
Yeah.
And then maybe it's going to create something that's good enough for people to keep on coming back. So I think they're kind of playing the long game, if anything. Right now they know that they're not as essential of a service as Disney Plus is. And I think they're just kind of trying to keep things friendly and not start some kind of Cold War between themselves and Disney. Because right now they're kind of both benefiting from it. I think Disney has to... I think if Disney's using the App Store as its platform for for Disney Plus subscriptions, it's paying Apple a cut of the subscription fee. So everybody wins in this current situation that we're in. And, like, Bob Iger's departure from the Apple board was, from what I read, pretty amicable. It wasn't like he didn't really get kicked off. It was just kind of a formality because it would have been a conflict of interest for him to stay on. So it seems like things between Apple and Disney are pretty positive right now. And even if they were both the same kind of thing and it were more of a direct competition, I think both of them would be in the situation where people aren't always necessarily choosing one or the other. Some people are going to have both, and there's a lot of overlap. I think a lot of people they have subscriptions to multiple streaming services. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to see where the streaming market goes in another few years. So what else has happened in tech recently?
Motorola announced a new Razr folding phone. So there's now 2 on the market.
Throwback to 2007. Nice.
Yeah.
So what do you think of these folding phones? These flip phones, if you will.
Yeah. I think this is the way to do it. I think the way Motorola did it is the way that most phone companies should do it. Although I haven't seen Xiaomi, I think, that's making another folding phone with the screen on the outside. That'll be pretty interesting.
So what is the design of the Razr?
The Razr, it's basically just a flip phone with the screen on the inside. It flips open to make it about as tall as a normal smartphone screen. On the web page, it says it's a 6.2-inch OLED display. So that's quite large for a phone screen. It's about the size of an iPhone 11/10R. And it's also got a display on the outside. Although that one's not really usable for a whole lot unless you're taking selfies or looking at the time, because it's just under 3 inches diagonally.
So it's basically just like if you folded an iPhone in half from the top to the bottom.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. I think that is definitely the way foldables should be made. The way that Samsung did it, which was basically opening an iPhone into two iPhones side by side. I think the problem with that is that the aspect ratio is all wrong. It's basically a square, which isn't really useful for much of anything. So
Yeah.
I
Plus
think
the screen on the outside, which is more of your traditional aspect ratio, is really small.
right, exactly.
So typing and doing pretty much anything will be very difficult.
Yeah, I think it's much more beneficial to shrink an iPhone than it is to expand an iPhone, because now it can fit
Yeah.
in more people's pockets. It's just more portable. I think that's the most appealing way to do foldables, even if, like, I'm not really convinced that they're going to take off too much. I
Yeah.
think that AR is going to kind of negate the need for larger, more efficiently stored display spaces, because you'll just be able to, like, place a display wherever you want if you have AR glasses. If it's already encompassing your entire field of view, you don't need to worry about condensing a display into a portable area. So, yeah, I think it looks really interesting, at least. And I'm curious to see if adoption really takes off. And so, are you expecting like Apple to make a folding device?
Not at the moment.
As in, not literally right now.
Yeah.
So, how about in a few moments?
Probably still no. I don't really see them coming out with a folding device. I don't really see a need for it. Because all their phones are very pocketable.
Yeah.
So I don't really see a need.
So, how about like a folding iPad that can become pocketable?
That I could see a little bit more. Although I don't know if Apple would do the plastic screen. They would probably have to
yeah.
figure out a way to make glass foldable.
Right. I think that's why they've not jumped on the bandwagon so quickly, because they want the technology to advance to the point where it's safely or sustainably operable over a long period of time before they
Yeah.
just jump in and get the functionality working. So, yeah, I think there's a chance you could see a foldable iPad eventually, but I don't know if it's really going to be that appealing. And Apple tends to make things that, even if they're more expensive than most people want them, they could be used or enjoyed by most people. And
Yeah.
I don't think foldables are really there yet.
Yeah.
So, any other major like tech announcements so far since we last talked? It's kind of a slow season. Oh, okay. One thing that's going to be happening in December is the Mac Pro launch, and we kind of
Ooh,
missed
yeah.
WWDC, so we can talk a little bit about that. What did you think about the Mac Pro that came before this, the 2013 edition?
You froze, so I didn't hear like a word you said.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. So one thing that's going to be going on in December is the launch of the new Mac Pro. So that's something we can talk about because we missed WWDC in June.
Yeah.
So what did you think of the 2013 edition of the Mac Pro that was released before this one?
I think it looked super cool, but I don't think it was really a Pro device. It was like the Mac Mini Plus.
That's a good way to put it. It was pretty limited in its use cases.
Yeah.
So what do you think of the cheese grater?
I think it looks super cool. I think the design of the holes is super neat. Outrageously, it's going to be outrageously expensive.
Yeah, I don't think
But-
they've published any pricing information.
I don't think so either. But what people have speculated makes it seem very, very expensive.
I mean, the previous one, the one from 2013, even in 2019, was still selling for something like the price of a pretty decent car. So
Yeah.
this one could go up to like a Ferrari. No, not that far. But Yes, you're right. It is going to get pretty exorbitant eventually.
Yeah.
I agree with you though. The design is pretty good. I think the bashing of the cheese grater likeness was a bit much. I think it's fine. It's
Yeah.
not astonishing, but it's inventive at least. It looks interesting, and it's still, I think, pretty small. I don't remember the exact dimensions, but
Yeah,
it doesn't seem
but-
like it's too much bigger than the previous one. I wish it came in
Yeah.
space gray though. It looks like it's only in
Oh,
silver.
yeah.
That would be so cool.
Yeah.
Do you think the iMac Pro is going to get an update at some point?
Hopefully. I think that's a pretty like a in between the like just a regular iMac and a Mac Pro,
Yeah.
especially like for heavier workflows that need more than just a spec'd out iMac, but
Mhm.
less than a Mac Pro.
Yeah, I wonder if there was some way that Apple could have merged the iMac Pro and the Mac Pro into a single device that had a lot of different spec levels. So you could get a lower spec version of the whatever the combined device is, but you could also get a really high spec version. Like, is there a way to complicate the lineup a little bit less and make it the same device that comes with a display? I mean, I guess that's actually not ideal, because then part of the benefit of the Mac Pro is that you can get it without a display. So, I mean, I guess the lineup is fine with the distinction between the iMac Pro and the Mac Pro. But sometimes it does seem confusing when you're kind of like, well, which one is meant for which type of person? But I guess if you're one of the people who's going to buy one of these, you know which one is for you, even if it doesn't
Yeah.
really make sense to consumers. And then the Mac Mini is kind of still hanging out there. It hasn't gotten updated since last year, but I think it
Yeah.
can go into like next WWDC until
Yeah.
then to get an update.
Yeah, and I think the Mac Mini I think that's an interesting option. It kind of a specific use case.
Yeah.
For me, I would see it more being used as like a file server or something like that for like maybe Xcode compiling.
Right.
I don't know about the GPU options, but if you do an external one, that would be good for rendering. That's kind of more what I see it for, as like either a secondary computer that you don't really use directly,
Mhm.
or just like you like desperately need a Mac, but you don't want to spend more than $1,000 on one.
Yeah, they still don't have any laptops below $1,000. I think
Yeah.
this is kind of going to be how the lineup stays for a while. I don't think they want to make
Yeah.
really cheap MacBooks. I think iPads are just kind of taking that spot in the line.
Yeah.
Because if you don't need a Mac and you want something cheap, then an iPad is probably going to serve your needs.
Yeah, and I think with iPad OS, that's definitely
yeah.
it's a much more viable option than in the past with
Yeah.
just iOS on a large screen.
Right. I'm very disappointed that my iPad Mini 2 does not support iPad OS. I guess they're going to make me buy a new one sometime.
Yeah.
Not right
Well,
now. though.
my iPad 1 doesn't support more than iOS 5.3, so
Oh
or whatever it's
man,
on.
they totally scammed you there.
Yeah.
I think it's still impressive how far Apple is supporting old devices with software, because like the
Oh,
the
yeah.
original Google Pixel is getting its last security update this fall sometime. I think it's December.
Yeah.
So Google promised 3 years of security updates, and that's what they gave. But Apple is still doing like 5 years so far, and
Yeah.
those are like full feature updates too. So I think eventually they'll get to the point where they extend the lifespan of those products even further. So
Yeah.
probably these current iPhones are solid enough to last another like 6 or 7 years on the latest software.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. Eventually, the only drawback to that would be, like, they want to design the features for the best phones. So eventually, it's not just that you technically can't support them; it's that they technically kind of hold you back from making progress.
Yeah.
So have you? You're on Mac OS Catalina still, right?
Yes.
I think I asked you about this last time. What do you think of the Marzipan or Catalyst apps. Have you used many of them?
Not a lot. I have the Twitter app, but I'm normally on my phone when I'm looking through Twitter. I have used the podcasts app. That one's pretty decent. Although the one time I used it, it did freeze on me. So that
Nice.
that probably wasn't the, didn't leave the best impression. But overall, I've had okay experiences. And from what I've seen, especially from like developers and other people on Twitter, it's very easy to develop for it, and even to make it look good and not like an iOS app on a Mac.
I think we're kind of at the point where eventually the only real reason to develop a Mac app is going to be because it's so easy to, if you already have an iOS app. Because the Mac doesn't really drive enough market share to make it an essential platform for apps. So apart from like professionals who are using it for work-related reasons, consumer apps are going to be increasingly more Catalyst-based, I think.
Yeah.
So there have been some rumors that eventually iPads and Macs, probably in like 2020 or 2021, are going to move to micro LED displays. Have you, or maybe it was mini LED. Have you seen those rumors?
Not really. Maybe for the Mac, I think I've seen that rumor. But I think that would be a good option.
Okay, I found
because it's like OLED, but more.
Right.
It'll last longer.
Yeah, it's so mini LED. Apparently, a high-end iPad and MacBook with mini LED displays will be launched between late 2020 and mid 2021. So I'm looking up the difference between like mini LEDs and OLEDs. I think it's the main thing is just power saving. It's much more power efficient. Apparently that could be useful for Apple Watches too, because they that'll help them last longer than a single day. I still think Apple Watches are fine on just a day's charge, and then you charge them at night when you sleep. But once they get, the only real future power benefit is going to be when they bring it to 2 days, because like a day and a half, that's still not enough to make it meaningful. You're still going to charge it at night.
Yeah.
Or every other night you sleep with it on. But meaningful sleep tracking will come when it's like it lasts a week on a charge, and I think that will happen eventually as the processors get better, and the batteries get better, and the displays get better. So, I mean, pretty much all of Apple's product categories are at the point where they're getting closer to like the perfect iteration of the product, but they're still at the point where you can kind of speculate as to what will be improved in the future. So I think they're overall in pretty good shape. 2019 has been a really good year if you factor in the MacBook Pro to the mix, because now they've pretty much all of their product lines have had their major holes patched.
Yeah.
So the butterfly keyboard was the main issue before this, and now it's kind of been resolved. And the iPad's lack of dedicated software was a problem, and now iPad OS resolved that.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't know what else there is for them to do other than, I guess, maybe make the iPhone more accessible. I think they're in really good shape right now, because they still have some cheap lower end iPhones on the market. Like the iPhone 8 goes like down to $449 now.
Yeah.
But that iPhone SE successor will fix that. So basically, even though Apple's individual product lines aren't perfect, they're just, it's harder to spot glaring holes in them like it was before.
Yeah.
So, like with the MacBook in particular. So what, oh my goodness, how do we forget this? There's a recent rumor that was published about Apple's plans for AR, for dedicated AR headsets. We didn't talk about this last episode, did we?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
and I haven't heard this rumor at all.
Oh, really? Okay. This is fun. So apparently, Apple held an internal briefing with company employees about their plans for a dedicated AR headset to be launched in 2022. So this would be something more like an Oculus device, where it's like a full-on headset that totally obscures your field of vision. That's the impression I get. And it would be followed up by a pair of regular, I mean, quote-unquote regular, AR glasses, more like thick-framed sunglasses, in 2023 that would be designed to be worn all day, etc. So that's pretty interesting to me, especially that they're confident enough that they would tell, I think it was 1,000 employees were at that briefing. So especially because this actually ended up leaking, I think Apple's kind of trying to signal to the market like we're on the way with our product, and not like watch out for us, but they don't mind people knowing, which I think means they're pretty confident in this as being the next major computing platform. So what do you think of AR glasses as a concept?
I'm not really sure. I think it's a neat idea, but I think it's more of a gimmick for most people than actually usable. There are places where I think it would be actually really useful, like maybe product design. Instead of like creating a model, maybe you just throw on some glasses, and then you can like look at all the different things without actually having to put resources into actually building a prototype.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of really the only place I really see it. I don't, other than just like a expensive gimmick, I don't really see much of a use for it in the real world. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we definitely will have to wait. But I'm pretty optimistic about it, I guess. I think that eventually we'll reach the point where the technology is good enough that you could have a set of glasses on and like basically just project a display onto a flat surface near you. So you could still like tap and swipe on it, but it would be able to, it would feel like a real, I think as humans it's more intuitive for us to tap and swipe on flat surfaces as opposed to just like in the air where it's more abstract. But if you were projecting something with AR glasses onto like a table in front of you, it would be more private because only you could see it, and you could still, you'd have no limitations on display area just because there's no physical device that you're holding. Yeah. So I think just for exactly what we use our desktops and iPhones for, AR glasses will basically eliminate the physical constraints of those things. And like think about how instead of having an iMac monitor on your desk, you could just be projecting a display in front of your eyes, and then you could type on a physical keyboard or whatever keyboard you wanted, and it would connect to that device. So it's kind of just as a replacement for the physical screen, without taking into account other use cases that are made possible exclusively by AR. I think AR could be really beneficial as just a regular computing platform the way we use Macs and iPhones and everything else. Also, imagine if it were smart enough that if you looked at your wrist, it projected the time onto your wrist. That would be pretty interesting. But this is all stuff that's not really going to be there when AR glasses first launch. So I think in order to get a foothold in the market, they're going to need to have some kind of, not gimmick, but like a feature that really makes them appealing. Sort of like the iPhone had. Just kind of, I guess the iPhone didn't really have a single killer thing. It was just the intuitiveness of the whole thing. But once AR finds a really good use case that really appeals to a lot of people, I think it'll get accepted into the market, and then it'll reach the point where its really useful aspects will come out. But it's going to take time to develop into something really transformative. So I think the iPhone is going to be around for a while, but apparently Apple's planning on replacing it in like a decade or something like that. That was part of the report that was published about the AR glasses. So that was a rant about AR, but so any other major tech topics from the past couple weeks?
Um, I don't think so.
It's kind of a slow season, as we mentioned. There were iPhones, then AirPods, then MacBooks, but now we're in kind of the dead zone of the year where, apart from like the Mac Pro, there's not much to really look forward to. We just have to wait until next year.
Yeah.
So I'll see you next year. We're done for the year. Just take December off. Just kidding. There are always rumors, and there's always speculation. There's never a dull moment if you use your imagination. All right, so good talk, Jason. That was pretty productive. I think we
Yeah.
talked about more than we expected to.
Yeah, definitely.
Before we recorded, we were thinking, what could we possibly talk about? Like, what's actually happened? But, all right, that was a good episode, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. So I will see you next time, and hopefully we'll have something interesting to talk about other than our wish lists.
Yeah.
All right, see you next time.
See ya.